Stop what you are doing and look at the screen right now because the history books are being written in real time and you are missing the fine print while the headlines lie to your face. We are not talking about a policy dispute today, and we are not talking about a minor disagreement over tax rates or border adjustments. We are talking about a regicide. We are talking about the moment the Republican Party looked at its own king, looked at the polls, looked at the price of lumber in their home districts, and decided to pull the trigger on a political assassination that 6 months ago was statistically impossible. You are looking at a screenshot of the House floor vote on H.J. Res. 72, and that red light next to the names of 6 sitting Republicans is the most dangerous signal currently flashing on the entire global switchboard. The vote was 219 to 211. A resolution to terminate President Trump's emergency declaration on Canada, to strip him of his tariff powers, to handcuff the commander-in-chief on his signature economic policy, and the margin of victory, the kill shot, came from inside the House. This is the moment the monolithic wall of the MAGA movement developed a structural fracture that cannot be patched with a rally or a tweet because this wasn't about loyalty, it was about survival. Rewind the tape to 72 hours ago to understand the absolute gravity of this betrayal. The White House Strategy Room, the nerve center of the America First doctrine, calculated that they had total operational control. The narrative was set. Canada is a national security threat. That was the line. They invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the IEEPA, which is the legislative equivalent of a nuclear football for trade. It gives the president godlike powers to shut down commerce if there is an unusual and extraordinary threat. They claimed the northern border fentanyl crisis and the trade imbalances constituted an emergency on par with the Iranian hostage crisis or the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It was a gamble. A massive, high-stakes gamble relying on the assumption that the Republican caucus would rather swallow a trade war with our closest ally than cross Donald Trump. They bet that the fear of a primary challenge would silence the fear of economic collapse. And for 211 Republicans, they were right. But for 6 of them, the math broke. I want you to look at the faces of the defectors because these are the men who just walked into the line of fire. Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska, Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky, Representative Kevin Kiley of California, Representative Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Representative Dan Newhouse of Washington, Representative Jeff Hurd of Colorado. These aren't just random backbenchers throwing stones. These are representatives from districts where the economic reality of a trade war with Canada isn't a theoretical debate on a cable news show. It is a foreclosure notice on a constituent's front door. Take Washington State. The trade relationship between Washington and British Columbia is practically a single circulatory system. You cut off that blood flow with a 25% tariff, and you don't just hurt Justin Trudeau, you put the lights out in Seattle and Spokane. Dan Newhouse didn't vote against Trump because he loves liberals. He voted against Trump because his voters can't eat nationalism. They need export markets. Then you look at Thomas Massey. The man is a walking copy of the Constitution. He has been warning for years that Congress has abdicated its throne, that we have created an imperial presidency where one man can wake up on the wrong side of the bed and tax the American consumer into oblivion. Massey didn't frame this as a defense of Canada. He framed it as a defense of Article 1. He stood on that floor and effectively said, "The king does not have the power of the purse. We do." That is a declaration of war against the modern executive branch. And do not for one second think this went unnoticed. The reaction from Mar-a-Lago was immediate, visceral, and terrifyingly clear. We have the receipts. We have the Truth Social post that went up before the ink was even dry on the vote tally. Any Republican in the House or the Senate that votes against tariffs will seriously suffer the consequences come election time, and that includes primaries. Feel the temperature of that sentence. That is not the language of a party leader trying to whip votes. That is the language of a mob boss telling his captains that he knows where their families live. He is explicitly linking economic loyalty to political existence. He is saying that if you do not support the trade war, you are no longer a Republican, you are an enemy combatant, and usually that threat works. Usually the knees buckle and the spines turn to jelly, but not today. Why? Because the pain is real. This is the secret that the strategists in D.C. forgot. All politics is local. When you slap a tariff on Canadian steel, aluminum, and lumber, you are not taxing a foreign country. That is the lie they sell you. You are taxing the American construction company in Pennsylvania that needs that steel to build a bridge. You are taxing the home builder in Colorado who needs that lumber to frame a house. You are taxing the auto plant in Kentucky that relies on a supply chain that crosses the Detroit-Windsor Bridge 5 times before a car is finished. These 6 Republicans looked at their spreadsheets and realized that a primary challenge from the right is scary. But a general election loss caused by a local recession is fatal. They chose the lesser of 2 evils. They chose to fight the president rather than bankrupt their own voters. This is the collision of populist rhetoric with the hard, cold concrete of supply chain economics. You can say America first all you want, but when America first means my district last, the coalition begins to crumble. Let's go deeper into the mechanics of this because the media is glossing over the specific weapon used here. HJ Res 72 isn't a polite request. It is a disapproval resolution under the National Emergencies Act. It is a privileged resolution. That means the leadership couldn't bury it. They couldn't hide it in committee. It had to come to the floor. The Democrats knew this. They laid the trap perfectly. They forced every single Republican to go on the record. Are you with the president or are you with the Constitution and the economy? And by peeling off just 6 votes, just 6, they shattered the illusion of total control. This is a numbers game. The majority is razor thin. If you lose 6 people, you lose the House. The Speaker is paralyzed. He can't discipline these members because he needs their votes to pass a budget, to keep the lights on, to pass anything else. The rebels have all the leverage. They are holding the gavel hostage. Now, project this forward. What happens next week? The bill goes to the Senate. And if you think the House is a mess, wait until you see the Senate. The Senate is where the institutionalists live. You have senators like Rand Paul, who hates tariffs on a molecular level. You have senators like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who answer to no one but their own conscience and their specific state interests. You have senators from border states who know that the northern border isn't a war zone, it's a marketplace. The probability that this passes the Senate is approaching 90%. And then what? It lands on the Resolute desk. President Trump will veto it. He has to. He cannot sign a bill that explicitly rebukes his authority. He will pull out the veto pen and he will kill the resolution. But the veto is not the victory. The veto is the trap. By vetoing a bill passed by his own party, he officially declares war on the legislative branch. He creates a visual where the Republican president is fighting the Republican Congress. It destroys the narrative of unity. It signals to Xi Jinping, to Putin, to the European Union that the American government is at war with itself. And let's talk about the unspoken factor here, the money, the donor class, the people who write the checks that keep the lights on at the RNC. They are screaming. The Chamber of Commerce, the Business Roundtable, the manufacturing associations. They have been back-channeling for weeks, begging the White House to stand down on Canada. They know that this trade war is inflationary. They know it kills margins. When those 6 Republicans voted yes, they weren't just listening to voters, they were listening to the people who fund their campaigns. This is the unspoken civil war within the GOP, the populist base versus the business wing. For years, Trump managed to straddle both. He gave the base the culture war and the business wing the tax cuts. But tariffs? Tariffs are where the alliance breaks. Tariffs are where the business wing draws the line. These 6 votes are the first shots fired by the business wing in a long time. They are saying, we will tolerate the tweets, we will tolerate the chaos, but we will not tolerate the destruction of our profit margins. This is a moral reckoning for the conservative movement. We have to ask ourselves what we actually believe. Do we believe in free markets? Do we believe in the separation of powers? Or do we believe in the absolute authority of one man? Because you cannot have both. You cannot claim to be a constitutional conservative and then cheer when the executive branch usurps the taxation power of the legislature. That is cognitive dissonance. Thomas Massey knows this. That is why he voted the way he did. He is the canary in the coal mine. He is telling you that the air is getting toxic. If the Republican Party becomes a vehicle solely for the projection of executive power, it ceases to be a political party and becomes a personality cult. And history tells us that personality cults are incredibly unstable forms of government. They work great until the leader makes a mistake. And when the leader makes a mistake that costs people their jobs, the loyalty evaporates faster than water on a hot sidewalk. Look closely at the justification again. National security. The administration claimed that Canadian trade practices are a threat to the national security of the United States. Think about the absurdity of that statement. We share the longest undefended border in the world. We share an integrated energy grid. We share intelligence through 5 eyes. We fight in the same wars. To label Canada a national security threat is to empty the term national security of all meaning. If Canada is a threat, then everything is a threat. And if everything is a threat, then the president has emergency powers over everything. That is the slippery slope these 6 Republicans saw. They realized that if they let this slide, if they let the president use emergency powers to slap tariffs on our closest ally, there is nothing he can't do. He could declare a national emergency on big tech and seize Twitter. He could declare a national emergency on the climate and ban gas cars. Oh, wait, that's what the other side wants to do. You see the danger? If you hand the weapon to your guy, you are handing it to the next guy. These 6 Republicans just tried to break the weapon before it destroys the system. So where does this leave you? You, the citizen, watching this unfold? It leaves you in the crossfire, because while the elephants fight, the grass gets trampled. The markets are reacting. The Canadian dollar is swinging. Futures are volatile. Uncertainty is the poison of the economy, and we just injected a massive dose of it into the veins of the North American market. If you work in manufacturing, if you work in logistics, if you work in agriculture, your livelihood is now a poker chip on a table in Washington, D.C. The president is doubling down. He has to. He cannot look weak. He will likely escalate. He might threaten to close the border entirely. He might impose even higher tariffs by executive order, daring the courts to stop him. And the Congress will have to decide if they have the stomach for a protracted war. But the signal has been sent. The monolith is cracked. The fear is gone. Once you defy the boss and survive, the spell is broken. Other Republicans are watching. They are checking the wind. They are seeing that the sky didn't fall when Massey and Bacon voted yes. They are seeing that their local papers are praising them for protecting local jobs. And that is the most dangerous thing for the Trump administration. Not the opposition party, but the loss of fear within his own ranks. If the fear goes, the control goes. And if the control goes, the agenda stalls. We are watching the potential lame ducking of a president in real time, caused not by the Democrats, but by the structural contradictions of his own policy. This is the story the mainstream media won't tell you because they are too obsessed with the personality drama. They want to talk about who is angry at who. But the real story is structural. It is about the architecture of power in America. It is about the fact that the founders designed a system specifically to prevent exactly what the president is trying to do. And for the first time in years, the system is working as intended. The friction you are feeling, the chaos, that is the sound of checks and balances grinding into gear. It is ugly, it is loud, it is scary, but it is necessary. Because the alternative is a rubber-stamped Congress that serves at the pleasure of the king. And that, my friends, is not a republic. So keep your eyes on the Senate, keep your eyes on the veto, but most importantly, keep your eyes on the prices at your local hardware store, because that is where the vote is actually counted. That is where the policy meets the pavement. The 6 Republicans who crossed the aisle didn't do it for applause. They did it because they saw the economic hurricane coming, and they decided to board up the windows. The question is it too little, too late? Or is this the beginning of the great Republican Civil War of 2026? The first shot has been fired, the smoke is in the air, and everyone is waiting to see who shoots next. This is not over. This is just the opening skirmish, and you are standing on the battlefield.